Well, we've run into a major issue with it, and I don't know whether it's because of the two different flywheels or not. I got over 40 thou side play, over 40 thou.
Might not be the first one that will make it right. Working day after day, sometimes into the night. There are so many pieces to figure out what to do, but in the end, you know what's right for you. You know what's right for you. You know what's right for you.
Well, hello, my name's Ralph, and welcome back to the channel. It's my time, let's go. Today we're into a little different ball of wax, and I thought you might find it interesting. Sometimes things just don't go right, and I can make mistakes just like everybody else. But if I don't pass on the mistakes, not only do I not learn from it, but possibly you wouldn't learn from it. So as I always say, I'm no expert, so I'm trying to put things out there as easy as I can and show you what happened. So stick with today's video. We're going to show you what we get into at first, where we made a mistake, and how we're going to correct it, and show you the right sets of flywheels to use in your shovel. Today we're going to start working on the bottom end and getting it together on this on Marley and seeing where we can move ahead. What I'm running into with this one, and I'm looking at, and I'm seeing that my pinion side has a 78 part number on it. And the 78 part number on the pinion side usually designates from 1978 up to 1981. Now on my left-hand flywheel here, this one has a 70 part number, but it's also stamped 77 down in here, and I think which is a manufacturer date. And this is a 70A. 70A usually designates from 1972 to 1980. So we should be able to interchange these. If you're using the earlier ones with the part 41 part number on it, you cannot mix the two. And it's my understanding that I'm going to be all right here, because in 1973 they changed the balance factor from 50% to 60%, which made a difference. But because my flywheels are both manufactured in those dates, I should be within the realm of possibility in there to make it work right. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble this bottom end. It shouldn't be a problem at all. Like I say, if I would have had a 70 number on the left-hand wheel, there'd be no way that I could do it, because the balance factor would be out between the two flywheels. So it's a sticky thing to get in there and mix up, but as long as the balance factor was the same, that's the primary issue. So we should be quite all right with these. So I'm going to go ahead, get the crank pin out. We're going to start assembling, and hopefully we'll get it in lathe today, get the bottom end trued up, and that'll be another thing out of the way, and we'll be a lot closer to assembling Marley's bottom end and getting her ready to go. All right, let's get at it. Well, we've run into a major issue with it, and I don't know whether it's because of the two different flywheels or not. I got over 40 thou side play, over 40 thou, and it's supposed to be like 25 thousandths of an inch. So to get these apart, that stuff is set up probably. So I'm not sure what's happening there. So I got it apart, so that's one saving grace, but something is not right. Something is not right with it, and you can get a smaller crank pin to take up the slack, but I'm wondering now if it's a problem with the flywheels. So we're trying to determine what's going on, why the rod set is so far apart. I've got a set of good rods here, And I'm measuring out at 1.750, 1.751, so give or take 1/1000 of an inch. So the width of the rod is proper, so it's not there. It's got to be the mismatched flywheels is the only thing that I can think in it that would set it that far apart. Yeah, never run into that dilemma before, but I've never used different years flywheels, and you know, according to my notes from Kurt, sometimes it says you should use them as a 74 flywheels and 80 flywheels as a difference. Now I don't know what the thickness or the offset is, and I don't have anything to compare it by. I can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it. So I'm going to have to scratch my head, and unfortunately I don't have a set of wheels kicking around anywhere that I can compare the offset in them. But there definitely must be an offset difference in the 80-inch wheel, the thickness of it from the other one. Now Jim's does make a smaller crank pin if I could get one. I can't get one through any of my suppliers, but I'm going to have to see what I can do and see how much difference, how much shorter that pin is. If I put a shorter pin in it, it's going to close up the gap. And right now I'm way over 40 thou, 42 thou, and it should be like 25 max, and they're just rattly in there. So they can't go like that. One step forward, 3 steps back. And I at least had rods to compare. And these are 74 rods, and these are 74 rods as well. Don't know. So because we've run into problems with these flywheels, I thought that I might put a little something in here that maybe will give somebody a hand when they're looking through an old stack of flywheels and wondering what they got and what they can use. The problem we've run into with these is that our sprocket side is an early flywheel, and this pinion side is a later flywheel. And the flywheels are easily identified by the part numbers that are on them. You can't match them together. They'll look all right and everything else, but you'll end up with massive clearance problems like we had in this case. So we're going to try to give you a little taste of flywheel stuff here, and there's a few specific things to look for. The earlier flywheels, the knuckles and pads, were a little different animal, and they had a shorter shaft on them because they ran a generator, so everything was not moved out as far. Once we get up to 70, 71, they made an extended shaft like this that would stick out farther. Now those particular 78 to 81s had a larger shaft on them in the taper that fit onto the flywheels, and it was, if you measured at the high spot, was about 1.420. 78A is an 81 to 85 left hand side. They commonized the taper in there to 1.320, so it's a smaller taper in those particular wheels. So that's kind of a dead giveaway. Now, so you could have a smaller shaft in there or a bigger shaft. Those are a few subtle differences, and if your flywheels are empty, you know, you could take your calipers and measure the hole here right at the tip of it, and you're going to get like 1.372. Now if it was the other side taper, it would be 1.320. So we know that this is the larger taper on it, that it has the longer main shaft, so it's after 72. Also, one of the other telltale signs can be when you look in here, and if you see steel thrust washers here, not brass ones like they're in this, but steel thrust washers, that will designate that it's just up to 1972, because they used the steel cages in the rods right up to 72. So they had to have steel thrust washers on the outside. 70, 71, I believe, is when they put them right into the wheel. The knuckles and things like that had little ones that you would put in there, and you'd actually set the end play with those steel thrust washers. These are your typical ones for knuckles and stuff. You see these go in, instead of the steel washers, you use these. And they fit in on each side of the flywheel and set your end play. Now the thrust washers are interchangeable to my understanding, and they're both the same size, so you could go either way. So if you were putting a set of rods in and you were using the aluminum cages, wanted to use those, then you would need to use the brass washers in there so you could use them. Other things that you can find that are obvious when you look at it is the timing marks. And you can see we got a dot and a slash and a dot. So this is front cylinder advance, top dead center, rear cylinder advance. Now when you have the other ones, you'll have a lazy 8 and then a dot and then a slash. So that your dot is going to be actually your front cylinder advance, and your slash, which will be back here, is actually your top dead center. So they're the things to look for. They say all right-hand flywheels like this with a 41 on them are interchangeable right up to 1980. Now the only thing that you have to remember is that in, I think, 1973 they changed the balance factor on the wheels and took them up to a 60% balance factor. The early ones had a 50% balance factor on them. So if you had let's say a 1966 right-hand wheel with the markings on it, and you wanted to put a 1975 left-hand on it, that wouldn't work because the balance factor would be out of whack on it. So we have to make sure that things are in the right years, as we've done here with this set. So you will see the right-hand wheels with all kinds of numbers, but it will be like a 41. They could be like this. In this case, we can see that we have the 41 there, a series of numbers and then the 41. But down on here is an identifying mark, and it says, you know, something drilled through 2972. It's telling me these are a 1972 set of wheels. They would work with the left-hand wheel, which has a 70 part number, which would be for 70 or 71, or they'd also work with the 70A, which can be used through a variety of years. So basically the 41 flywheels are going to match right up from 1941 to 1980. It's the left hand that you have to watch out for. Now the left-hand wheels can be marked in a various way. If they got a 60 part number on them, then they're early pans, like 65 to 69 pans. If they have a 70 part number on them, that means that they're 70, 71 specific. But it will be longer to get out to because you got an alternator now. After the 70A came the 78. So if you've got one with a part number that says 1978 on it, that is an 80 cubic inch flywheel. Now the part number for the 78s ran from late 1978 up to 81, and these were 80-inch flywheels. There was one more change, and they had the 1978 part number on them, and that was 81 to 85. So in those years, your timing marks changed, the crank pin changed. The crank pin on the early models, where your keyway is, there's a hole down here, and this hole is set off, they say 110 to 135 degrees off the top. Now in 80-81, that hole moved up to 90 degrees. So also you can tell by looking in the crank pin if it's at 90 degrees. But the part 78 part number makes it brutally honest as to what it is. So you can't interchange and swap. You can't take that 41 wheel, but you got to make sure that that 41 wheel is either early, as mine is here for our application. It's got it cleaned up here now, and it's got a 60 number on it. So I know that it's earlier than the 73. Lots of times when you see the 70 part number, you know, that's all it'll say on it is a P70. Like this would have the serial number here with the 70A, but no other markings. This just has one little plate there that kind of says December. After this, starting like in 73, they would have a 4 or 5 digit number with a 73 or a 77 on it. So the part number 70A, as long as it's not marked later years, you're okay. And usually in the earlier years, from 70, 71, 72, they didn't put any part numbers on them. I can't say that I've seen them, but I don't know everything though. But I do know that after 73, you start seeing the part numbers on them, the serial number and then the year, and that will tell you what that one's for. Now this one that was in the project bike, it's actually got a 77 serial number written on it here. So I know that this one is 1977, which means it's up into the 73 and up 60% balance factor. And it had a right-hand wheel, which was a part number 78, which was an 80-inch wheel, so they're not going to work. Now, out of curiosity's sake, I took the right-hand flywheel, I weighed it, and it weighed 13.6 pounds. Then I took the 80-inch one that I knew I had with the 78 part number on it, and I measured it, and it came out at 13 pounds. Now, half a pound difference in the flywheel rotation is a lot. See why they say if you can mix and match sometimes, but you've got to rebalance. So this motor would have shook itself to bits pretty quick. Perhaps that's why it was in under the bench. So you've got to watch those. Now, I've seen them many years after that, as I showed you with the first one. This one has the 72 number on it. And after that, you know, it's a variety of numbers from 73 up. That'll show you what's what. Those are pretty well the basics. You know, you could, if you're seeing the flywheels kicking around and they got a pinion shaft still in them, you could look for something like this. And this has got a groove in it that's supposed to be there with a small hole. This is a 71, 72 side oiler shaft. The taper is the same, it fits in the flywheel the same, but that will show you that it's been used for like in a 71, 72 with the side oiler. After that, they never had the groove in them. They just all end oiled through the end. Again, the tapers are the same, they fit in, they all get keyways in them. You know, those type of things are the same. And you might have a shaft like that in it, possibly. Which this is a knucklehead shaft here with spline for the gears on it, but the taper again is the same. And the oil hole in it is off at 135 degrees. I hope that answers a few questions about flywheels. I can't get into overly extensive, and I probably missed something. If I do, I'll try to add it in as I go. But those are some identifying marks that can give you an idea when you go to pick them up of what you're looking at, especially if they're just two empty flywheels. Looking into, you know, going by the numbers, the 60, the 70, the 70A, the 78, and the 78A are all designate what they are. So if I think of anything else, I'll add it in. That should give you an idea of what you're looking at. Okay. The one other thing that I'd like to mention is that when you're looking at the flywheels, if they're apart, pay attention to how many holes there are in it. Like these ones, early ones have, you know, just a few holes in them, like that. And there's something that hasn't been fooled with. Those are going to be my mates. But if you see something like this, where a whole mess of holes across the bottom, especially holes up here at the top. It's a no-no when you're balancing, not to drill up by the crankshaft part. But that tells you somebody's been at that, somebody's tried to balance it, and who knows if they got it right. You know, it's in my junk there, so I had it sitting there that one day if I wanted to be ambitious, I could try and balance them up if need be, but I haven't run into that problem yet. And those ones are extremely, extremely drilled out. So try to look for flywheels that are as clean as can be with as minimal amount of holes in them. And that'll show you that they haven't been fooled with a whole lot. You have a better chance of getting a stock balance set sitting right by going by that as a rule of thumb. Stay away from all the holes. So as with anything, there's a lot of variables that you have to worry about, and lots of times until you run into the situation, you're not researching it, you're not trying to find out what it is, you're taking somebody's word or you're just buying them up. Thinking that one's going to be one and one's going to be something else is not always the case. In this case, we took apart a motor that Brad had with no history on it. I don't know what happened, it was just a separate motor, and I would expect somebody put these flywheels together in there, and then it just it vibrated too much, and there was way too much clearance between the thrust washers, which may explain why the thrust washers look like they did, because the rods wouldn't come over far enough, you know, to truly wear out in there. They were just kind of running in the center, I would expect, because of the alignment. So as you can see, you're better off to stick to the years that are there. For the 74s, keep them in the 74s. You can't use 1/2 74, 1/2 80. It's just not going to work. So I hope that helps clarify some things on these a little bit. There's always more stuff to learn. We're always learning different things, but when you go to pick them up in an old swap meet pile, then you know what you're looking for. You know, I have had cases where someone has said, oh, these are 74 wheels, I'm sure, and they had the 78 part number on them. The 78 part number on both wheels is a dead giveaway to the 80 cubic inches. So be sure of what you're getting and what pieces match together. It's always a learning experience, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about dealing with these old Harleys, is the challenge of trying to figure out what's what and learning what's what, and it's very satisfying in the end. So I hope that helps you all out a little bit with flywheels, and let's move on. So we're gonna get the pinion shaft put in now. I've taken the pinion shaft and wire wheeled all the threads off, nice and clean. I've also taken Scotch-Brite inside the taper there and rubbed it all out nice, and then cleaned it all out with brake clean. And one last thing that I want to do is shoot some brake clean through it, just through the small hole in the crank pin area. It should come straight out there, which it does. Blowing straight out the hole. So you always want to blow those out and make sure that there's no obstructions in there or stuff from when you were working on it and cleaning it and that sort of stuff. Your crank pin hole a little going over itself. There we go. And just a small shot to make sure there's none of that Scotch-Brite in it. Okay. Pinion shaft and a square key. There we go. Put your brand Loctite. Just wipe it off a little bit there. We just need a little bit on it because this one's going to have the key lock. 1 13/16 on this puppy. Okay, we want to find our little key lock. Once we're tight, make sure that we're close to the hole in this little key lock that's got to go in there. Because once you tighten it, we don't untighten. 170 pounds. Go. We'll check to see if we can get our lock on. She's got to go a little bit more. Just a little bit. And these little buggers are shot. So I think I've got a package, yes I do, of the flathead screws in there. Just going to run it down to make sure it's going to go to bottom. Let me let the hole is clear. Yeah. Okay. They say not to use Loctite on these. Alrighty, that's in there. Thinking I might put just set a punch in there just to make sure that those are seated in there. They seem to be fine. I can't move them. I think I'll stake it in a couple places. I'm just going to try it in a couple places. So I'm not sure what the history is here. Okay, that should do it. I feel good about that. A couple little ones in it. Right, alrighty then. Go. Shoot that through it, make sure it's good. Now, just gonna put a little touch of green on it. Make sure the tapers are nice and clean. We hardly know there's any on there, really. Yeah, we'll slide that into place. There we go. A little drip of green on it. I'm gonna have to take a teeny tiny bit off of that, I think. Just a hair. Doesn't want to quite go down on that. So I had to take my little 1.5" socket and I've cut it off so it's flush, flat for sitting down onto the nut. But I also had to cut a shoulder on it here because where the cutout is on the flywheel is for earlier nuts. And this is a later style nut. So I want to make sure that it goes down and fits on there nice and tight and square. 175 pounds on my crank pin nut. Now these early flywheels take the locks mechanism to go in there, and there's a little hole, but because we're using the later crank pin nut, which is 20 threads per inch instead of 16 threads per inch, SNES says you don't need to put the locks on them, they're just fine like that. All right. Okay. So when I originally did the calculations for the rod sizes, it came out that I needed a 0.0005 bearing. Well, there is no such bearing. So I could go 0.0004, but I can also safely go to the 0.0006. And if you do the calculations for it, it still leaves me the clearance inside of this, about 4 10,000ths on each side of the bearing. So a complete 8 10,000ths instead of 1,000ths. So it's well within the specs, keep it nice and tight, and we're gonna try that and see. And sometimes when you're working with them, everything will fit as it's supposed to, sometimes it won't. So fitting bearings is a trial and error, so you should have a selection of them. So I have 0.0006 and I also have 0.0004. So we're gonna try the 6s, we're gonna see how that goes. Hopefully it'll all fit together, give us a nice snug fit on there, and it'll all be good. We still have our bearings set together, so hopefully I'm just going to be able to grab it here and not lose any. Small one at the bottom, fat one in the middle. Just something to grease them up and give them a fighting chance. Use Vaseline in there, and don't use any kind of grease, only Vaseline, because Vaseline is water soluble and it'll go away. And we have one last check around at all of our needles, bearings. So I'm hoping this time goes a little better with the end play, being as they're a match set, where I was out so far on the other one over 42 to 45 thou easy. And I think it's because of the mismatched flywheels that caused the problem. Alright, we have to remember our pinion shaft is on this side, means our sprocket shaft is on that side. So it's like we're sitting on the bike this way, means that the female rod, the rear rod, has to go at the rear. Okay. And there we are. Nice, nice fit. Nice fit. So we clean this off. Good. Okay, and our early wheel. Just gonna clean the taper out a little bit there. A little dab will do ya. Very little there because we don't want any in the bearings. Just enough to say some on there. Okay. Line these up as best you can there, and I'm going to put them in the press. Try and lock them up closer if I can, and I'm not going to torque them all the way. Take these back to 65. And we're going to set those over in the press so that I can press them in line, or help to keep them in line. Looks like I'm pretty close to a 25 in there, so all right. By putting it in there with this piece of channel lock at the top of it and pressing it down in there and then snugging it up, it can help to keep the flywheels in line a lot better. I do have a thing that goes through on there and you can clamp on that, but I found that this works a lot better. And we just put it in there with a little bit of channel bar, press it down there, and that should hopefully help to keep it in line. I'm going to take it over to the lathe and set it up and try to true these wheels up. Well, we'll try it there, but I don't think that I can get much of a shot. Put a thou in a little bit. So we're getting really close now, within like thou and a half. So I'm going to re-torque these up, and I've torqued the other side up. All right, then hopefully we can put it back in the lathe, lined up for the final time, get it within 1/1000th of an inch. That's the plan. Hard to get it. Just a thou and a little bit. And that's about where we're going to get it. So old flywheels can be very trying. You know, we've got new parts in some of it, but it still has the old shaft in it. Without replacing every single part in it, it's hard to get them to run exact. And with the old flywheels, I mean, those are old flywheels. Those are panhead era or 70, 71, 72 style flywheels, I think. So, you know, it's pretty hard to get them exact. We got it into about 1/1000th of an inch. So I'm gonna have to learn to be happy with what I got. Some things that are newer, you can get down a little finer, a little finer, a little finer, but with old flywheels, that's why Harley says, you know, 1 to 2 thou, you're just fine. And with those old beaters, there won't be a problem. So I feel confident about that, and I'm gonna about call it a day on those. So that's what they're gonna be. So if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell, do those kind of things. It helps us to grow. Be sure and check out my brothers down south, Hippie's Chopper Corner and Slickhead's Custom Cycles. Well, as you can see today, we ran into a lot of ball of wax, and I hope that by sticking out there as much information as I can give you, might help you when you're looking for flywheels at a swap meet, or seeing or figuring out what you got in your bike. There's a lot of variables to it. There's more than one would think, and it's something to watch out for when you're mix and matching, or you can run into big problems. Be sure to join us next week when we're going to work way farther. We're going to get our cases on there, and we got some modifications to do to the cases to make them work proper with the new oil pumps that I think you'll find interesting. So stick with us next week, see what's coming. So if you find this stuff interesting and you haven't been following along with the series, you can start the series here and check it out and everything that we're going through, or check out one of the other videos that I'm sure you'll find interesting. That being said, I'll see you next week.